Hey everyone, I'm your host, Courtney Post, and this is Let's Vet Together by Suveto, a show where we'll be highlighting stories of growth, ownership, and well-being in the veterinary industry and having real conversations about how we can make veterinary medicine better for everyone. If this is your first time listening, welcome. We're glad you're here. If you've already been a part of our community, make sure to follow us on whatever platform you're listening from and give us a review to let us know how we're doing. We really appreciate you for coming back. Welcome to Let's Vet Together. I am so excited today to be sitting down quite literally in a fireside chat with one of my dear friends, friend first, colleague second, Dr. Dave Cloutier. Dave, welcome to the Let's Vet Together podcast.
This is my first. It's great to be here.
This is exciting. So Dave, I, of course, would give your background, and I'd probably focus on your amazing family and our time together, eating great cheese and drinking great wine and all the adventures we've had outside. But I would love for you to share with all of our listeners a little bit about yourself, you as a veterinarian, you as a practice owner of Veazie Vet, which is an incredible hospital, as well as maybe introduce something personal that you've brought with you to the podcast. A lot of times folks bring food or drink. I know today you have the most Dave Cloutier main item with you to introduce yourself. So I'm going to turn it over to you to give a little bit of your background and share what you've brought with you today.
Wonderful. So from Suveto's standpoint, I'm a legacy owner. Sold to Suveto a couple of years ago. Thank you, Courtney, for that. I'm the medical advisory board, which is a lot of fun. I'm a mentor to a couple of recent grads in the mentee program, which has been very rewarding as well. And I believe that I'm termed the medical director of Veazie Vet. But when I walk through the door of Veazie Vet, I am Dave Cloutier, but really my role there is the keeper of our culture. So for many years, we've really focused on culture at our hospital and what that is to our team. And really that's the secret sauce to our success that we've talked about for a long time. Maybe a topic for another time.
Definitely a topic for another time.
Different at that. And then, some personal things. If Courtney, you've been to the house and yes, had wine and cheese, but I don't think you were here during the right time of year to sit behind your steering wheel at the helm of the water ski boat. And if you were in that role, an important detail you would need to know is what is my barefoot water ski speed? So your speed is calculated by your weight, 180 pounds, divided by 10, so that's 18, plus 20. So 38 miles an hour is where you're going to take me if I'm barefooting. If I'm brave enough to spin around and go backwards, you can slow down by 5 to 33. And if I give you the 1 foot sign, that means take it up to 43 because we're going to go 1 foot. So those are important details if you're ever sitting behind the steering wheel in the driver's seat of the boat.
I hope to do that sometime because that means that I'm in Maine in warm weather boat season, which somehow hasn't happened for me yet.
Oh, it hasn't? I'm not sure why. Now, admittedly, I woke up this morning and for the first morning, our lake is frozen over. So it's time to take this barefoot water ski suit, fold it up, put it away. I'll see you again in about 5 months, sometime in May. So then here in Maine, many people know like the high-tech snowshoes, aluminum and, kind of fancy aerospace technology snowshoes. But as a traditional Mainer, I love these old style snowshoes. These were actually—
Those are not a decoration. Those are actually your snowshoes, Dave.
These are my shoes. No, yes, they don't hang up like on the wall in the lodge. I went to the garage and pulled them out, dusted them off. So lots of craftsmen here in Maine will bend ash, a type of wood, bend the ash to make these. And there's different styles, the bear paw, beaver tail, different names. And then it's an animal skin and leather. And if I have a foot of new snow, especially a full moon night, foot of powdery snow, my favorite thing is to leave my headlamp and my cell phone on the table, put these snowshoes on and go out in the woods. There's enough ambient light from the moon and you can just bomb around in the woods in these snowshoes. So I will take those every day over the fancy new high-tech ones.
Well, I have another reason to come to Maine now in the winter because I actually love to snowshoe. Somewhat embarrassed to say that I have probably the model of snowshoes that you just showed prior to your fancy mane ones. And it looks like I need to invest in some good Maine craftsman, snowshoes. So that's going on my main list. So
you can get them at antique shops all over the place because people think that they're antique and they should hang on the wall. But if you dust them off and soften up the leather a little bit and put them on your feet, they're actually way more fun to use.
I mean, I'm in. When Dave makes a suggestion, I take it. That's what our listeners need to hear. So I'm in for that, which really leads us to our conversation today, because Dave has made a suggestion. As thoughtful as Dave is with the type of snowshoes he uses, as well as the speed by which his barefoot ski boat needs to be driven, you brought that same thoughtfulness and real detail, as well as the why behind really the care fund that Veazie Vet has put together for your community. And we're going to talk about that today, because we have actually taken the model that you have at Veazie Vet and have brought that to the Suveto network. So the conversation today is really all about how have you created this in a way that is sustainable, that your staff and your entire hospital feels really bought into, that they feel like they can provide care to someone that otherwise would not be able to access that care. And what has that done for you and your community, Dave? So can you give us a little bit of the history behind the Veazie Cares before we have, kind of stolen that to become the Suveto Care Fund?
I think we shared. It was a willing sharing.
It was a willing sharing. Yes, you offered, we shared.
Yes. So a sad story of how it started. So one of our receptionists many, many years ago, so we're talking about 30 years ago, one of our receptionist daughters contracted the HIV virus from a blood transfusion, and she passed away. And that receptionist wanted something meaningful to do with the money that came in as donations. And so she said, geez, could we start some type of fund? And so that fund was started in her daughter's name. And the original money that went into it obviously came from people that donated. But periodically in the practice, someone would feel generous and say, hey, I'd like to help someone else out. What can I do with this? So all of that money went into that same fund. And over the years, so for a long period of time, obviously we've had it for 30 years, different opportunities have come up of what do we do with these different funds. So I actually had a client, his name was Doug, and had a dog named Matu. And he really, really, I don't think did anything or went anywhere without Matu, and did a great job taking care of him. And Doug stuttered very intensely. And if the dog wasn't there, he really couldn't even talk. So Doug did a great job of taking care of Matu until one day he ruptured a cruciate ligament. So we repaired it and set up a payment plan for Doug. Unfortunately, later that year, no surprise, other cruciate ruptures, we fixed side 2. And whatever modest means Doug had, he still always every month made a payment, but really wasn't making a lot of progress. So when Matu passed away, Doug still had a pretty significant balance at our hospital. And he came to me and said, I'm not going to be able to get another dog. And he was really struggling with that concept. I said, Doug, why can't you get another dog? He said, until I've paid off my balance at Veazie, I can't get another dog. It just doesn't feel right. So it happened to be the end of the year. We're doing Christmas cards. So we write Doug a Christmas card that his balance is paid in full. And he struggled with that because he felt like it was a charitable gift that he didn't necessarily deserve. But if anyone deserved it, Doug certainly did. And so that was a great feels good moment for our hospital. When I think sometimes at that time of year, people are looking at writing off clients, sending them to collections, maybe firing clients. And we've started actually at that time of year, sometimes sending clients Christmas cards saying, the circumstances that put you in this financial situation, we'd like to just forgive this debt. So it's wiped clean. And maybe someday you can pay it forward. And every once in a while, one of those clients will come through the door and want to contribute to one of the funds. So at some point, we really wanted to make a more formal way to do this.
Right.
And so that's kind of the next part of it, which is occasionally we have clients that want to start a fund of their own.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the first ones is the Kiko Fund. And Luann and John, about 20 years ago, said, hey, we don't have kids. We recognize that there's lots of people out there that need help. We'd like to do something meaningful at the holidays rather than just buy ourselves something. We're going to put money in this fund. And Kiko was their first dog that passed away, so we called it the Kiko Fund. So now to start to make this a little more well thought out and organized, we just create a client. We use Impromed as our software. We create a client in Impromed called the Kiko Fund. And whenever money goes into that fund, then we just create a credit. And at any point that we want to draw out of it, we can simply deduct some of that credit and apply it to somebody else's. So then to try and make funds go further, how do you kind of leverage this a little bit? So frequently these cases start off with one of our doctors saying, I want to help this client. I have someone in front of me and I want to help. So the first thing they can do, all of our doctors work on commission, they can give up their commission. Mm-hmm. And that's about a quarter of the cost of the care of that pet. And then the next quarter is Veazie Veterinary Clinic is a fairly profitable hospital. So about a quarter of it would be our profit. So we give that up. And that leaves another half. And we usually just try to see if the client can give some, maybe another quarter. And then the fund pays that last quarter.
Got it. So Dave, over the years, have you put those funds together to be one kind of more impactful fund?
So we actually haven't. So the original Jill Fund, when it ran out of money and that receptionist was no longer with us, it didn't necessarily make sense to keep calling it the Jill Fund. Mm-hmm. So then when Luann and John started giving on a regular basis, and they actually asked their family rather than to give them gifts to put money in that fund. So that's when the Kiko Fund happened. And if we just have a random donation that comes in, we'll put it in the Kiko Fund. But if I have another donor who says, hey, we would really like to do something that would make a difference in the world, and could we somehow do something at Veazie Vet? And the only downside to it is it's a donation to something that's not a charity. So Veazie Vet is not a 501c3. It's not tax deductible.
Right.
Now, I think that as soon as you make it something bigger, which we will talk about later, you could do that.
Right.
So we have quite a few funds, actually.
Interesting. I actually didn't realize that. I didn't realize you had different funds, but they all function the same way. And this is where, when we talk about the mutual borrowing, it was how you actually shape that fund. Because so often we are faced with a place that, you want to try to help someone that cannot afford a service, and a doctor is willing to potentially give up, the production that they would make and the funds that they would make off of that. But how do you go about deciding who uses this and why? So talk to us a little bit about your staff involvement and who do you use these funds for, and what is the process by which, you evaluate that as a team, because I think that's the real uniqueness. And I want you to circle back as well and go through the split of kind of the division of the funds of how you use them, because I think that that's the real, everyone has stake in the decision that's made as well as the contribution that's made to that fund.
Perfect. So I think there's an important part of it that you mentioned, and that is that everyone is involved. So invariably, what happens when a client comes in and can't afford the care that their pet needs? And there's times that it's a very old pet that has a terminal illness that it doesn't make sense to invest a huge amount of resources trying to save a patient that we know is unlikely to be successful. Mm-hmm. So we don't use funds for that last ditch effort for the client who's just not ready to let go. But the heartbreaker for all of us is, what if when it's the opposite scenario? The 2-year-old cat fell out of the little girl's arms, broke its leg, and here it is on our doorstep, and the owners just don't have the ability to pay for it. Mm-hmm. And so what do we do in those cases? And whose heart's broken by this? And whoever the assistant or technician that's in the room and the doctor that is facing that client, your heart sinks because this little cat is in a loving home. And I'm looking at the kids and the owners and thinking, we need to fix this. We euthanasia is not what any of us want to even talk about.
Sure.
And unfortunately, I think in some hospitals, they have this idea of, well, what if that client signs the pet over and we fix it and then we find it a new home? And at the end of the day, when everyone goes home, does it really feel good that I took a pet out of a loving home, fixed it, and I found it a different home? Like,
Sure.
it just doesn't feel right. And so I don't think anyone goes home at the end of that day feeling great about it. So what we wanted was the team to say, hey, I want to somehow help this person. So let's investigate this a little bit. So anyone can initiate it. Sometimes it's the receptionist on the phone who hears what's going on. And before that client even gets there, has kind of started that process. Hey, I've got an owner coming in with this scenario. I don't think they're going to be able to afford the care. Can we talk about using a fund?
Mm-hmm.
So that starts it, or the technician in the room, or the doctor that's in there. And all of our doctors know as soon as we start adjusting all these fees that their commission's going away and that. And we're all willing participants. And it may be me that fixes the fracture, but I didn't see the cat originally. None of us really mind. It's going to get fit in somewhere and taken care of. So whoever wants to do that starts to initiate it. And everyone gets very crafty with, well, maybe we don't need to do this, or oh, I know that there's some free meds and we have something called the free drawer. So any medication that a client's returned or that is not appropriate to sell goes in the free drawer. And lots of things are donated to the free drawer. So medication will come out of that. And we're just as careful as we can be in what we're spending and start to figure out a way, how do we fix that broken leg for whatever it is the client can afford? And kind of figuring that out is important.
And I think that's an important part too. So you have your staff involved, you have your doctors, actually the providers, the service providers involved, and you do have your client involved. So as you said, you actually approach this to what the client can afford as well, that they have stake in the game before you even then tap into the fund and the resources that you have there.
It's important they can retain a little bit of dignity. And right. Sometimes it's I have $100, and it's like, then that's okay, you know. And there's times that we look at someone on fixed income that's really struggling to get by, and like, oh, you know, I can pay you $20 a month for 10 years, and it's like, no, we're not. So some of them we just decide whatever they have available to them in that moment is payment in full.
Sure.
If we decide that's the right thing.
Sure. So Dave, talk to me about how you raise money for these funds outside of charitable donations. So is this something that as a staff that you've decided that when that you put some efforts and resources to collectively to make sure that it will live on aside from waiting for that end of the year donation to Kiko's? Just curious, like what you have done to continue to keep that fund alive and well.
So originally, when the fund was there and I was the owner of Veazie Vet, I really looked at it as I was matching those funds because obviously the profits of Veazie Vet become mine as the owner. So initially it felt right for the hospital to match whatever was in there. And so we're all and the doctor's matching it. So everyone's contributing. Now, of course, that's not the case. So I feel compelled to donate to other funds, whether it's the one at Veazie Vet or the one at Suveto. So those type of donations are there. Our team has looked at different fundraisers. So occasionally they've done a raffle or different things, and that money goes in. So whenever there's this extra money, what do you do with this? Or occasionally there's a pharmaceutical rep who wants to contribute something and what do we do with that? Oh, we can buy lunch for everyone at lunchtime, or maybe we want to put it in the fund. So the team's always looking for other opportunities to put money into these funds.
Yeah, that's great. Talk about the impact that this fund or the approach to being able to have this type of collective decision making and impact to clients, that what that has done to the culture of your hospital. There's a lot of things that affect the culture of Veazie Vet. That's, again, podcast 2. But specifically your approach to kind of the Veazie Fund, which eventually is, again, we're talking about Suveto Cares Fund. What has that done to your culture, or what culture has it shaped in your hospital?
So if you think of that first scenario of, we have a pet that the owner can't care for, let's have them sign it over to us, and everybody leaves crying, and we scramble to care for it and then find it a home. And at the end, I don't know that anyone really feels particularly good about that. Mm-hmm. And you contrast that to the receptionist felt compelled to encourage this client to come in despite the fact they know they can't afford the care. So that individual is feeling good that somehow I've made a difference. Even though I don't physically care for the animals, I'm answering the phone and talking to the client. They started it. They got the client through the door. And without that, we never would have had the opportunity to care for that pet. So they're feeling good. And then as a technician, and old habits die hard. So the technician will sometimes come to me and say, hey, we have this cat in room 2. It's got a broken leg. I was thinking about using a fund. Do you think that's okay? And I'm like, I don't know. Do you think that's okay? So when I said part of my job as the keeper of our culture of distributive leadership, is to remind them that this is not my decision. This is your fund. This is your hospital. Mm-hmm. You decide. And they'll make their case. Well, I think this is a really good idea. And I said, so do I. So let's go ahead and do this. So we encourage them to be the ones who decide. Mm-hmm. And the doctors who are collectively caring for that patient, everybody at the end of the day goes home feeling like, this is part of why I'm here. It's part of why I'm a veterinarian or work on a veterinary healthcare team is I'm here to make a difference. And we made a difference today. And there's no downside. The neat thing of nobody loses here, which is really cool.
Well, what have you ever had a staff divided on where to use the fund?
I would say no. I think our hospital is large enough. So there's 6 or 7 doctors and 45 on our team. So it's usually not a collective. Everybody's even aware of it until it's maybe already happened. Mm-hmm. So, but the group who's passionate about it makes it happen, looks after the pet and the client, and sends them on their way. So I don't think it's ever been a controversial.
Just curious.
No. Occasionally it's like, ooh, this person's a new client. They've never been here before. Should we do it? Should we have them come in? Mm-hmm. And once that receptionist has made a commitment to them, then it's pretty much a done deal and it's going to happen. So.
Right. For those listening that are just starting to participate in the Suveto Cares Fund, there's been the seed funding of that, which, a lot of folks that are listening have contributed to that first kind of, initial round of Suveto Cares. A lot of hospitals are now doing fundraisers for their Suveto Cares Fund, understanding, again, how to use this model of everyone buying in to decide who to use this for, and how everyone can contribute kind of that 25, 25, 25, 25 of how you care for that pet. If I'm listening and I'm a medical director of a hospital and we've never had a fund like this before, how do you start to roll this out to your team? How do you get alignment and excitement that everyone is bought in, that this is a tool that the team can use, that this is something that can unite the team and feel like that everyone has a stake in the decision making? Where would you start with that, Dave?
I think the first thing obviously is to describe it. When are we going to use it? What circumstances are appropriate, and what aren't? And because there are things that it doesn't make sense to use it for. And so a lot of it, we don't do any end of life care with our fund. It's all to save a pet and send them home is where we are. It doesn't mean that's the right answer, but that's what we've chosen. Sure. So it has to be a relatively good prognosis. It also has to be a pet that needs to stay in that home. It's totally different when someone comes in and says, hey, my roommate's moved out, left me with this dog. I'm really not a dog person. I didn't choose to have this dog. Now it's sick. I would really just like to have it go to a shelter. Yes, though that pet probably does need to go get fixed and then go to the shelter. But in that loving home kind of scenario, that's what's tugging at everyone's heartstrings. So as soon as the team says, hey, can we not charge for this x-ray? Or can we maybe do this differently because this client can't afford this? Or, hey, they're thinking of amputating this leg versus fixing it. Or they're thinking of putting this 2-year-old block cat to sleep because they can't afford to unblock it. That's when it's like, hey, what other options do we have?
Sure.
And trying to lead that team to be like, oh, that's right. So what if we look at the fund? So doctors are going to give up commission, hospitals going to give up profit. We're going to find whatever drugs and supplies we can that are free and use the fund and see then what can the owner do to also contribute a little bit.
Mm-hmm. On average, Dave, just curious, how frequently are you using this fund in a year? It sounds like, it's sometimes perception is reality, where you feel like, oh my gosh, we need it all the time, or, we always are faced with this client that's unable to afford this service. But in an average year, and Veazie Vet is a, busy, 6-doctor practice, but how often are you using, this fund to care for pets?
It's certainly every few weeks. Sometimes it seems more, sometimes less. And sometimes it's a smaller thing. So there's a client who's been able to provide most of the care for their pet. And then all of a sudden, oh, this is going to require 1 more day's hospitalization, or we're going to go over our estimate. And the client really is at their max, but we just need this last little bit. Those happen a fair amount. The really big ones, the broken leg, new client, probably less often, maybe only once a month for those. But it's a regular enough occurrence that the team knows the names of the funds. They know how much money's in them. So all the time I'll see them looking to see what's in a fund because they're thinking about trying to help.
Oh, that's great. That's great that and you've built that, a long-standing relationship with both donors as well as, the community that folks know that they can put money towards us. So that's, again, for those that are kind of just starting out with our Suveto Cares Fund, it can be a tool in the toolbox that you use ongoing, especially when you can build an ongoing place that you can raise money or, have some place that people can give donations to. And build the culture around your staff that is a great resource for everyone to feel a part of when looking to care for the pets of the hospital.
And I think you mentioned maybe have we rolled it into one fund? And now that the Suveto Cares Fund exists, that fund is operating at Veazie Vet as well. We may over time be rolling a lot of our smaller funds into that. And the idea of fundraising for that fund, because to expect that Suveto can provide all the funds for all of our hospitals to have this is unrealistic. So all of us getting involved and saying, this is a great idea, but we need more money for it. So how do we fundraise for it?
Well, and that's what's so fun within our network is to share ideas on to what is working, what are folks doing. I know there's a great t-shirt competition happening now that folks have made individual t-shirts for their hospitals that they're selling, and the proceeds of those sales are going into their Suveto Cares Fund. And to share that of, when you have a pharmaceutical rep, that was a great idea, Dave, that says, hey, I have some end of year funds that I want to use to the hospital. Buying lunch is really great for everyone, but also the camaraderie and the emotional, positivity that comes out of caring for a pet. It's really great to put those funds, in a Suveto Cares, account to be used for a client that is really needed as well. So that's a great tip for listeners as well.
There's one last thing that I was just thinking of that's a fun to do is there are times that there's a really meaningful case that we've used a substantive amount of a fund out of. I love just picking up a card and writing to Luann and John or to any of our fund donors, hey, just want you to know we used your funds. And I don't necessarily give all the details, but I give some of the details of, what good that money did. And we also have one at our emergency clinic. We had one of our clients ask about donating some money. And that was the start of the Comet Fund, which is after Angela's dog Comet. And she started that fund with a $5,000 check. She just took out her checkbooks like, I want to do something that is meaningful. And I said, this is not a charitable tax deductible donation. She said, I realize that and I don't care. Writes the check for $5,000, and that's the start of the Comet Fund. There's a lot of
That's great. There's a lot of great people out there that want to pay it forward. And in the holiday season that we're in now, it's a great reminder that there are great people. We collectively can do a lot of good together. Everyone that works within the practice should have a voice in that. And that's what's so special about what you've built at Veazie, how you have designed this, your Veazie Cares Fund that we have, adapted at Suveto into Suveto Cares. And we will continue to learn from your example, Dave. And hopefully everyone will find the years of impact that you have, going forward. So thanks so much for spending time with us, Dave. I appreciate it. And spoiler alert, we are going to have another podcast together, and we're going to talk about what Dave mentioned along the way in this podcast. No surprise that it came up, is the model of distributive leadership that Dave has built, and you live every day within Veazie Vet.
It's a great way to live. Makes my life enjoyable as a practitioner. So look forward to talking about it more.
I look forward to it as well. Thanks so much for your time today, Dave.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
You too.